Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hunker Down Guide show. And I'm your host, Jamie Robe, and I'll be your guide today. I'm excited because as I've already gone over a couple of the lessons from our new course on the website, the course is Hurricane Plan 101. And in this course, we're answering the big question to stay or get away. And in today's episode, we are going to go down to this second lesson on the section about hurricane evacuation zone. So we'd already gone over what is a hurricane evacuation zone in some detail. And now we're going to look at is your home specifically in a hurricane evac zone. So this is also in the step 1 chapter, page 6 to 9 in my book, Day Before Disaster. So if you like to look at a book or have that as a reference, it's really useful. And of course, it's on this website, hunkerdownguide.com. So I invite you to follow along with the video that follows here. It is the video version of this lesson, and you will also be able to see this on the website. So with that, we'll start the lesson. This lesson helps answer the question, is your home in a hurricane evacuation zone? Now that we understand what an evacuation zone is and why it's so important, we're going to run through some of the ways that you can easily find out your zone if you are in a zone. So remember, they are usually go from like a letter like zone A, B, C, and so on. And zone A is usually the most likely to be evacuated first, and then they may not evacuate all the zones in a storm. It all depends on the size and intensity of the storm and other factors. So we are going to jump over to the lesson website. And remember, if you're following along in the book, it's page 6 through 9. So the first thing I would do is to go make sure you've downloaded the worksheet. If you just click on the worksheet, you can see there's download at the bottom. Another thing you can do on these lessons is to click on complete the lesson, and it'll jump you to the next one. So we already did this one yesterday. So we're going to jump to the new lesson, is your home in a hurricane evacuation zone? And in this one, I have laid out the step-by-steps. So some of you may have just moved to a new area. You may not even know what county you're in. Let's say you moved into an area to do a job or change jobs. Maybe you've retired in an area that you're not familiar with. And so we're going to go through from the beginning, every step. But some of you may have actually lived in your home for years or decades. But you know what? It's a good idea to revisit this periodically because they update the zones. In fact, this all the zones, and I think in Florida got reevaluated, or at least in the Tampa Bay area for sure. So you need to look at this. I would say yearly. Just double check. So the first thing we're going to do is let's figure out what county that we're in. So I'm going to click on this link, and there's a tool called Ulta Maps, and it actually will tell you what county you're in. Now, one of the tricks to this is to type in US and then put in your zip code. So 33602 as an example. And we just do a search. And it is telling us that we are in Hillsborough County. And it even gives you a little map so you can see where, double check that it's correct. And remember, zip codes are postal delivery zones. So sometimes they might span, I don't know if they do span county lines, but if you're near the boundary or something, yeah, you can double check that. Is more accurate address up here, but with your zip code, generally you can figure out where you are exactly, in what county you're in. So that's number one step. So on the worksheet that we have, you can put in here that what county you're in, and we'll keep going. So the next thing to do is we want to have some sort of map or tool that will tell us. Now, sometimes you get um, an insert in the newspaper when there's a hurricane coming, or maybe at the beginning of the season they do it. Sometimes the TV weather or news will sponsor those. They're around in a community. Now, that requires that you're good at looking at a map and that you can find, there's enough detail to find where your home is, because some of these are larger scale. In Hillsborough County, remember we looked at, that as an example, and that is actually we're a 1,000 square mile county. So not to dwell just on Hillsborough, but this is an example of what one of those looks like. So trying to find exactly where your house is on something like this be a little trickier. So since we want to, really nail this one down, the thing to do is to find your local zone lookup tool. Now, these areas are pretty much they go state by state, and then it's down to the county level. That's where the emergency management offices are. So on this lesson, if you scroll down, you'll see I've got Gulf Coast states: Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, South Atlantic states: Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then your Mid-Atlantic and Northeast states like Connecticut and so on, Virginia, and then even down here in Hawaii. So you can click on these. We'll start with an example. I've got links here to both the emergency management state level things, and there's lots of good information on these sites. You can also, on this particular one, Florida has a Know Your Zone link itself. So if we go to this and we can click, it has some instructions, but you basically click on Know Your Zone map, and this will load up a interactive map. Maybe there's a lot of people looking at it right now. There we go. All right, so these are like online GIS mapping things, and you can see it starts out, maybe it comes from FEMA, I'm not sure, but this goes down. Yes, it's actually got all the different counties in Florida specifically, and we can zoom in and see, this whole area, and those areas in red that you see on your screen are zone A's. So you can see it's quite a lot, and then the colors fade out as they go further out. But luckily, there is a tool here where we can do a search. So at the top on this one, I'm just going to put in a random address. So I'm just pretending this is my house. And if I click that address, the map zooms in, puts a star, and it's over here on this left side. Let's see if I can zoom a little bit closer. Yeah, there's the thing. And it's actually telling us we are right above my head there. It says your evacuation zone is A. And it even says current evacuation status. I guess during a storm, they may update this with the latest evacuation orders. That's really cool too. But on this map, if we zoom in, we can just scroll with the mouse, and we can actually zoom in and see that, why is this area a zone A? Because there's actually a river right here. And so the houses that are adjacent or close in low-lying areas close to that river itself are in zone A. So you can see that even a difference between a block or a few hundred feet or something can make a big difference in where you're at, because the people, there's zone A, B, C, and these people I think are in D. So it is very, precise on what they're doing, because they're looking at the elevations and all sorts of other factors. But this is an example where a home site many, many miles from the bay itself are actually in a zone A. And you can see these zones, the further out you go, if you were in one of these areas that wasn't a zone, then you don't have to worry about storm surge at all. But remember, zone A isn't is the most likely to be evacuated first if there's a threat that warrants it. So that's kind of cool there. So let's go back and let's just pick another state at random here. So South Carolina, also a coastal state with a lot of low-lying areas, and they have a really nice website here. I'm going to jump back so it's larger. And the over here on the left, Zone Finder. So that's what they call their system, and it's all on this page. And look, there's a map down here, and I'll scroll it up, and we can actually put an address in there. So let's just put a random address, and it is bringing up a thing, and it zooms over and it says this address is in zone A. So again, it even tells you the county, and it is a very good thing to be able to look these things up on a map. Again, these maps are interactive, so you could click around, and explore. So in this one, again, the red ones are zone A, and then we have yellow is zone B, and in this, I guess South Carolina, they have looks like they have 3 levels, at least in this area. So that's a very easy and useful tool, and they essentially all have these types of things. So again, if you have to, you could use a map that you get from your local newspaper or maybe the weather station, and you can always contact your authorities in your local county. Call them up and tell them where you live and ask them about what zone that you're in. You can look these things up under Emergency Management Agency or Emergency Management Office at the state level and at the county level. And so that's just some of the things that we can use to find our zone. And again, I have all the links here, so you can use those. The other thing is record this on your, your worksheet, and because the way that this worksheet works and this logic is we're looking at all these different factors. So this is the first one. If you're in a zone that, then that you might have to deal with evacuation. So if you find yourself, if you are watching this lesson or reading the book and you're doing long range planning for hurricanes, great, excellent, you're doing great. You have time to make your plan A, which would have to be that you potentially need to evacuate if the order is given. And then your plan B would be to shelter in place, because let's say a tropical storm or hurricane was coming near your area, but the officials determined that there wasn't the storm surge threat, then you may not have to evacuate. But the other thing is you have to be ready. So if you're not in a hurricane evacuation zone, you write that down on your worksheet, and then we'll go on to the next lesson and the next step in this process. But the other thing to keep track of too is you need to monitor the status of the evacuations in your area. So if you're watching this lesson and there's a storm potentially breathing down your neck, then you want to keep in the loop. You can look at the National Hurricane Center, and but the main thing is to listen to your local radio stations and news stations, and find out from the authorities if they have created, that they're announced that they're going to do evacuations. And with that, we're going to go on to the next step.